2021. Not that impressed so far. My ears have been hurting since New Year's. America's still a show, but damn it, I have coasters to rank. So I'm gonna rank them. I'm gonna rank every coaster and give them a review. Every drop and every hill, every launch and every loop. Rate it 1 to 10 and then we'll do it all again. Gonna rank and review every coaster. What's going on, everybody? My name is Mario. This is a channel all about amusement park type stuff, but mostly coasters. And today, in my never-ending journey to rank and review every coaster that I have ever been on, I'm going to be talking about Superman Ride of Steel. Real quick, I want to say welcome back to my subscribers. You guys are awesome. And if you're not subscribed to this channel, you better subscribe, or else 2020 is going to happen all over again. Now, if you guys are wondering why my background looks so much better than it normally does, it's because, well, I don't actually have any pictures of Ride of Steel. I wasn't really an enthusiast when I visited the park 5+ years ago, and since it's been so long since I've ridden the ride, yeah, it might impact the way I rank it and review it, but oh well. But anyways, without any further ado, let's review. Now, Ride of Steel at Six Flags America is actually a clone of Ride of Steel at Six Flags Darien Lake. Although I haven't been on both, I'd have to assume that everything in this review is also applicable for Ride of Steel at Darien Lake. Now, Superman has a height of 197 feet, a drop height of 205 feet, a top speed of 73 miles per hour, a ride length of over 5,000 feet, which contributes to a long ride duration of 1 minute and 5 seconds from the lift to the final brakes. So this is a nice long ride, and I really like that. This is definitely one of those rides that gets overlooked because there's so many coasters of the same model that are better, but I still think this ride does a lot really well. This coaster is located all the way in the back of the park, which I'd have to assume is part of the reason that I never had to wait too long when I rode this thing. I think it's a pretty nice looking ride. I really like that blue and red color scheme, although it is definitely fading. It's also quite imposing in the area that it's in because it is by far the tallest structure in the area. Also, another really funky thing about this ride is it's kind of on stilts. I don't know if that makes any sense. I'll show you a freeze frame of the POV right here. I don't know if this is for flooding. I don't know if this is because the one at Darien Lake is actually on a lake, so it needs to have separation from the track and the water, but it definitely looks pretty funky. All right, now let's hop on ride and talk about the layout a little bit. And this is a bit of a weird one. To start things off, you turn out of the station, go into a lift hill, and that lift gives you a fantastic view of the area. Then as you crest the lift hill, you plummet down that 205-foot drop, which I remember being quite long, really good floater, a nice way to get things started. Nothing exceptional, but really, really solid. After you hit the bottom of the drop, you enter into a very wide, long turn, which doesn't have a ton of forces, but you are flying at that 73 miles per hour, which feels awesome, especially with how open these lap bar restraints are. Pulling out of the turn, you hit the ride's first airtime hill, which is decent. I'd say it's pretty comparable to the first airtime hill on Millennium Force. You get decent floater. I definitely don't remember this being a highlight of the ride by any means, but it's nice. After that airtime hill, you hop up just a little bit into a massive, and I mean massive, downward helix. And the beginning of this helix is kind of fun. It's similar to that first turn where it's just fun to be traveling at such a high speed, but it gets a little boring after a while. I mean, if you wanted perpetual right turns, you would just ride something like Space Mountain. And what comes after the helix is even less impressive and even more boring. Everyone's favorite element on a coaster, of course, straight track. Now, obviously, this ride catches a bunch of flack for having all this straight track, but when you consider the fact that it's a clone of Ride of Steel from Darien Lake, it makes a little more sense. At this point of the ride, at Darien Lake, you are actually kind of gliding over the lake. I think this is an instance where setting really makes a difference for a coaster, but also, to be fair, you are still going at an incredibly fast speed, and you feel the wind rushing your face, so it's really not all that much to complain about. And at the end of this straight track, there's at least a really solid element in the ride's second airtime hill. This hill gives consistent airtime from the beginning to the end of the hill, and it's easily one of the best elements on the ride. The strength of airtime is somewhere between floater and ejector, depending on how fast the ride is running, but either way, you're going to be out of your seat for at least 2 to 3 seconds. After that airtime hill, though, we get another helix, and this time it is an upwards helix. So not only is it completely repetitive since you just did a helix, but since it's an upward helix, you're also going to be losing significantly more momentum. And I think you can really see this in the POVs. In the downward helix, it at least feels like you're maintaining the same speed, which is really nice, but the upward helix, the speed difference is really noticeable from when you enter the helix to when you exit it. Although much like the straight track, after this boring element comes another really great part of the ride, and probably my favorite. You get a fantastic finale of ejector airtime hills. This was one of the first coasters that I really experienced ejector airtime on, and as I mentioned earlier, it comes on a ride that has fantastic lap bars, so you're really unrestricted, lifting up out of your seat. There's a lot to love with these airtime hills. And then you hit the brakes and yeah, that's pretty much it. Now it doesn't seem like there's a ton of elements, especially for a ride that lasts over a minute from the lift hill to the brakes, but I think this coaster is very similar to Millennium Force in the sense that even though you're not hitting a ton of elements, and even though none of the elements do anything extraordinary well, it's just fun to go on a long, fast-paced ride. And if I may compare it to Millennium Force yet again, I do think that certain individual elements of this ride do hit harder than most of the elements on Millennium Force. I think there's a lot of similarities in this layout. You have some relatively boring turns. Superman has straight track, which you don't get on Millennium Force, so Millennium Force definitely wins that aspect. And then you have 3 different types of airtime hills. You have a big airtime hill that gives mild floater at best, a smaller airtime hill that gives some stronger floater bordering ejector sometimes, and then you have an ejector finale. But at least Superman has 3 ejector airtime hills to end the ride, whereas Millennium Force only has 1. So I think Superman has a lot of good stuff going for it, but its biggest downfall is definitely its pacing. It seems like it's good element, okay element, great element, terrible element, boring element, great element, great element, great element. It's kind of just inconsistent in its pacing and its elements. Still a lot better than the Beast that has like no elements, though. Just saying. And as I mentioned earlier, this ride has really, really nice trains. I think a lot of people consider these Intamin T-bars to be some of the best restraints, and I can't disagree. These are the same type of trains and restraints that are on Millennium Force, so again, the comparisons do not stop. But yeah, I mean, you just feel so open and free, which is greatly beneficial when some of the elements aren't the best. So to start wrapping things up, I'm going to hit you guys with that good old-fashioned pros and cons list. Pros. I'd say the biggest pro is that there's some really fantastic airtime moments. I'd also say that this ride takes advantage of its height very well. It carries its speed throughout most of the ride, so its stats are not without merit. And lastly, of course, and this is a big one to me, the ride duration. I love long rides, and this does that really well, even if the pacing isn't the best. Which brings us into the cons. Pacing. Other than that, I mean, not so great elements, which contributes right back to the pacing, but the pacing of this ride is really the only con that I can find with it, which is why I give this thing a pretty decent rating of 8 out of 10. It does a lot well and only really does one thing not well. Now, to rank it and put it on the list of coasters that I've already talked about, it's no surprise it's gonna go above all of them, considering I've only ranked boomerangs and SLCs at this point. But out of the 208 coasters that I have been on, Superman Ride of Steel ranks incredibly well at number 18. Like I said at the top of this video, it's been an incredibly long time since I've ridden. I hadn't been on nearly as many coasters at the time of riding this, so I'm sure if I rewrote it, my opinions would have a good chance of changing. But as of now, from what I remember, this is where it sits. And if you guys actually want to keep up with the inevitably changing updated list, you can do so by clicking the top link in the description. But yeah, let me know if you guys have been on Ride of Steel at Six Flags America, Ride of Steel at Darien Lake, or both of them. I would love to hear how they compare to each other. Make sure to give the video a thumbs up if you liked it, 2 thumbs down if you didn't like it, subscribe and turn on notifications for more content like this, share the video if you're feeling extra fancy, and make sure to tune in next time where I'll be talking about... No. Please no. But damn it, I have coasters to rank, so I'm gonna rank them.